Great. Hello, audience. Thanks for coming. So this is called Feedback to Feature, and this is about the process and the tools we use to move from a big pile of customer interviews all the way to a polished feature delivery. And they're not the only tools you can use, but these are a couple things of my favorites about the process of moving from stuff you're hearing from customers all the way through breaking that down and moving that to something that you can ship. I found out that it was a 20-minute talk after I wrote the outline, so I've compressed it, and I've elected to go dense rather than brief. I just want to do some broad strokes and sketch this out for you. I'm going to take special care to give you the names of all of these workshop-y kinds of things that we do, so you can Google them or find them later. My contact information is up here, and then after my talk, I'll be hanging out outside the room if you want to chat more. I'm also located at the workshop wall all day today and tomorrow if you want to come by. One last thing, if you do have a pencil and pen handy, there is a brief intermission where we'll do a sketching exercise. So just if you want to do that. Okie dokie. And Confluence questions, as Vivian said. All right, so we're talking about the funnel from customer feedback, from interviews with customers, all the way down to delivering design. And so I've broken these into 4 broad categories: crunching, mapping, visualizing, designing. They're fairly self-explanatory. And I'm going to move right into crunching. There is an assumption for everything that I'm talking about that you're talking with your customers. When we did a project I'm working on, we had a bunch of different people doing interviews. We had interviews from about 40 different customers, and we went through that in skips and hops, finding out the salient information that we use to drive the design. If you don't have a rapport with your users or your customers, here's a couple things that we've done in the past to hunt them down and stalk them, find them, and talk to them. If you've found your folks, the next thing you do is you do have a conversation with them. You interview them. We talk about their customer experience with Atlassian. We talk about the software development lifecycle. And when we do that, we are listening, and we're trying to get inside their heads. We're trying to understand what life is like on their side of the screen and what they're trying to accomplish. As we look at our data from that, we are coming up with some puzzle pieces that we're trying to fit together, and those are going to drive insight for us so we can deliver something that customers want. Important thing about all these things that I'm going to be talking about is they're groupware. They are activities and workshop-y kinds of things that we do as a team with the whole team. This is really important because, I don't know how long you've been in technology projects, but how many times have you gotten to a solution where the team didn't actually agree on what the problem was, and the solution was a little fractured? Even if you don't hit the right solution the first time with some of these workshops, the thing that does happen is that everybody gets very, very congruent on the problem, and that's huge. Finally, the thing about doing this as a team, again, is that it's an invitation to the team to collaborate and have ownership. My friend Dan Zook runs a conference called UX Hong Kong, and he opened the conference with this comment just a couple years ago, and I think it's really important about the mood that needs to occur before innovation can happen. All right, I'm going to dive right into crunching. Now, this first activity is called a KJ sort. Have any of you heard of this? Didn't think there would be. It's also called affinity diagram or affinity mapping. Has anyone heard of this one? A couple of those, yep. If you haven't heard of it, I also call it just a bunch of sticky notes on a wall, and that's really what it is, the humble sticky note. So if you've got your customer interviews and you've been talking with your peeps, you're going through those and pulling out things that jump out at you, and you're putting them on a sticky note. Each idea, each comment, each question, each wish, each pain point gets a sticky note, and you can use different colors of notes for these different categories of things. And what you're trying to do, so if you think of each sticky note as an atom, what you're trying to do is build molecules. And that'll happen really easily. It's not really rocket science, but I put some things up here. It's like the molecule forming ideas, patterns, questions, relationships, topics, goals. These things start to form, and you'll see that these things are starting to clump together. If you're looking at your customer data, you've got your Post-it notes on the wall, and these molecules start forming. And for that section of like 40 customer interviews we were looking at, and we started to build a wall that's about this big. And we kind of got a little bit messy, but you can see that there are some molecules starting to form in a couple of areas. And this is about that the automated workflow and the development panel and the release version report that you saw earlier today at the keynote. And so this really was a wall. And it was quite large, and it really had a lot of information about how people were moving through their software development lifecycle and where the pain points were. When you're working with these molecules that you get, the thing that we do is we ask why 5 times. Like, so, why are the Scrum Masters really hating the end of the sprint? Because they have to do all this work matching up pull requests to issues. Well, why do they have to do that? Well, the developers aren't advancing their issues across the board. Well, why aren't they doing that? Oh, because they think that it's not their job. That's task management, and they're doing coding. And so we ask why all those questions, and we think, how can we help that happen? And that's how we get to the feature. And again, all these things that we do are groupware. We do them collaboratively as a dialectic. We're always talking with people. We're bringing them up to our wall and showing them the thing. The thing about it being such a large wall is it's a nice scale. You can walk around. You can look at it from different angles. This is just a public service announcement. I found out after I stitched all these shots together that you could actually use panorama mode with your phone and just walk along a whiteboard, and it works great. So that's just a little gift from me to you. All right, next is mapping. So now we're starting to talk about putting some structure to these molecules that you formed. And we're doing some reframing, some thinking about what we have discovered. There's 3 activities in this one, and these are kind of funny names. They don't really mean a lot. I've tried to give you alternate names when they appear. One's called a concept matrix, one's called a journey map, one's called an entity map. And they're stupid names, but I don't control the naming of these. So there. So the concept matrix is sort of at the mouth of the funnel. It's about distilling a central idea. And for instance, I'll give you an example. So let's say that I had come up with some Post-it notes about the contents of this talk, and I had like 8 or so ideas. Now with the concept matrix, what I'm doing is I'm grabbing those ideas and I'm putting them in a list down one side of a piece of paper or a whiteboard. And then I'm repeating that same list across the top. Now the diagonal is just repetition, so I'm crossing that out early. And then what I'm doing is I'm blocking out a square every time that there's a meaningful intersection between something on the left side and one of the columns. And because it's kind of a mirror image across the diagonal, I just repeat it across. And then what you're looking for is the ideas or the concepts that have the most intersections with other guys across that are coming down from the top. And so these are the keys idea. And then in that cloud of Post-it notes we had earlier, these are the things, these 3 items that have an outline, are the things that are central to that cluster of ideas. And so next you make a little game out of it, and you go, okay, well, I'm going to grab these 3 top scoring guys, and maybe the next 3 underneath it, and I'm going to try to make that into a sentence. And then I ended up with, this talk is about information tools to help your team analyze the data from your customer interviews. That's a concept matrix. I think some people call it concept mapping, but it's too close to one of the other names, so I skipped it. So journey map, you probably have heard about. These are really popular now, and it's about putting yourself in your customer's shoes. We'll get a team, and we're actually thinking about how our customers experience the things that we're offering them. From drive-thrus to movie theaters to restaurants, a lot of times the way you have to interact with it seems really crazy, and you think, how did they plan it this way? And they didn't plan it. It just happened. It just emerged from whatever was convenient for them at the time. And it's super simple. Basically, you're just working through each individual touch point that the user has with your service or your product, and you're pasting together using, again, the humble Post-it note. And sometimes we put the interactions that the users have across the top and then a line and then the response from the system. And these can get pretty elaborate. So here we've got the journey map. It's moving from the left side of this whiteboard to the right. Up across the top, we've actually got screens, like the screens they're seeing. And you can kind of see it down below that we've started to put brackets where we're grouping some of those activities into clusters, like awareness, understanding, purchase, evaluation. Another thing that's really common in this sort of journey mapping is this row down here that's outlined in red called the sentiment chart. So for each of those touch points, you're actually mapping where the customer's happiness or frustration is. And so you can see like somewhere, 3/4 of the way through, people are getting really frustrated with whatever they're mapping here. They're also capturing ideas from the team about how to improve those things in yellow and green at the bottom. These can become very polished. We kind of use some of these as official documents with the marketing people and with other teams. And again, this is the full view of that. Something about the Post-it note wall that I showed you earlier, I kind of remapped it to this, but we actually built the affinity map on top of a journey map. So we have each of our primary personas down the left side, and then we've got the software development lifecycle from setup to plan to work to verify across the top, and each activities for the personas in green boxes all through there. So when we plopped our Post-it notes from our affinity diagramming onto this, we actually knew who and where these pain points were happening. And finally, this last one's called the entity map, and it's about understanding relationships. Like it could be the object model of your product, it could be mental models for customers. Some people call it a relationship diagram. And it's also called entity relationship modeling. It's a mouthful. I've always just called it the noun and verb exercise. All these nodes are nouns or actors, and all the sticks are verbs. So, Jay writes, ignores, and misses while he's working on his summit talk. These are some folks at the Austin Center of Design, and they are mapping out how a food bank works. So they've got their people, their things, and then the actions and the relationships between the things. A friend of a friend in Austin did this map of Flickr, and this is how the pieces and people in Flickr interact with each other. And the great thing about this kind of map is it's very nonlinear. If you think about trying to describe how you interact with Flickr as paragraphs of text, it just becomes this gray wall of words. But this allows you to trace through those and make your own ideas and own assumptions about what's happening inside this mess of relationships. It's sketching time. So I was trying to work an intermission into a 20-minute talk, and this is it. If your stick figures, if you're doing a lot of sketching on the whiteboard and you're talking to people and you're doing this kind of sketch noting kind of thing that we're promoting here in this talk, maybe your stick figures are still back in 3rd grade and you're still doing the classic stick figure. And so I've been working with this guy named Ben Crothers, and he's also with me at the workshop wall if you want to come over and say hi. But he's trying to evolve us out of that 3rd grade stick figure. So he's got a couple things. The body here just becomes like a country fair first place little ribbon. And you can actually move this back and forth and create some gestural stuff and get quite expressive. And we have another one. If you want to practice this with your pen and pencil, you can do that now. Another one is just a square, but the thing about adding shoulders and hips to the figure instead of just a line is that you can begin to get some other expressive kinds of gestures. Yay! All right, the intermission is over. If you use any of these stick figures, just Twitter to Ben and thank him for giving you this great new stick figure. All right, so now we're getting to visualizing. While we're working through this stuff, we've been doing our mapping. We've broken down some ideas. We're starting to have some insights, maybe some hypotheses about things and how they're working. And what we do next is we try to sketch everything so that at the same time when we explore, we're also communicating. And so they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so why is that? Why not 50 words and why not 100 words? And it's because the part of our brain that our eyes work with is a lot older than the part of our brain that is language oriented. So, you're just kind of playing to seniority and experience, and it's a really fun way to work. Think back to innovation and fun from early in the talk. 2 big books that I've discovered recently on this topic. One is The Doodle Revolution by Sonny Brown, and the other one is The Back of the Napkin by Dan Rome. And they both talk about this sort of visual exploration that you do as you're exploring your ideas and you're coming up with solutions. When you're doing some sketching with your team, I really want to promote working big. We had that big Post-it wall. It was a whole wall on the 3rd floor. And you could walk around and look at it. If you're doing sketching together, get those big Post-it sheets, those sticky note sheets that are this big, and work on those. It's great to get your arm involved. Because if you're going to try to do this with your whole team, trying to get everybody around a couple of index cards on the desk is really hard. But if you got this up on the wall, everybody can look at it and gather around it. This wall was the same way. As I told you earlier, we could get the whole team of 7 or 8 and look at this and examine it together. And there was something really nice about seeing things that were related conceptually were actually physically related to as well, and things that were way down at the end of the cycle, we had to walk a few steps to go see. When I'm doing this sort of visualization sketching, I'm usually working with actors, actions, objects, and context. Now, Dan Rome, who's the author of one of those books, he's actually broken it down by the questions, who, what, when, where, and the kind of thing to draw for each one. And I'll show you some examples. So Shirley is one of our UX researchers up on the 8th floor, and she's looking at people and how they do service desks right now. And so she's actually mapping this out with her team. And, hey, what are people doing? When do they get calls? When do they get email? What happens? And she's actually working through this visually, and she's taken over a wall on the 8th floor, and they've actually been sketching through what they're seeing. So instead of just writing it up, they're also drawing it and illustrating it. I think you can see a little bit of a conceptual thing in the background there. And just notice some of those stick figures. Yeah. So this is a slightly more polished one, but you remember that post-it wall I was showing that we were working on with this, this project that I've been working on with the Fusion team that does all the development panel and the automated workflow. We thought that it was a linear process from concept to launch that we were talking about, and we were thinking that the code was the bouncing ball that was passing between the personas. But it wasn't that at all. It was code quality, and it was code quality that was the bouncing ball. And so we were thinking about it. It's not linear. It's actually radial. So Emma is our developer persona, and she's in the center, and she's using all of her tools, and code quality is radiating out of her. And then so Will, our team lead, is in a ring around there, and he's got some specific concerns. And Alana, our product owner, is in a ring around her, and they have specific concerns around traceability, visibility, and definition of done. And so this has really helped us kind of cement what it was that we were learning when we put all those Post-it notes together. So now we're getting back to designing, and there's a lot of mythology around this. So we've done our crunching, we've done some mapping, and we have started to sketch out what we think we're seeing in our customer information. And there's a bit of an ivory tower, some things about design. It's like, oh, do all this customer research, and then magic happens, and then we ship a design. And really the way that I see this, and these certainly aren't the only ways to work, these are ones of many ways to work, but the way I see this is that design doesn't inform the what, it informs the how. It becomes sort of a beacon or a mantra. You might think of it as a lighthouse that kind of keeps you from staring into the rocks. So we know the kinds of things that are going to irritate people, and we know the kinds of things that are going to please most people. And so what we've been doing at Atlassian is we're coming up with these things called design guidelines or design mantras, and we put these all over the walls, and we use them again and again as boundary conditions when we're designing so that we are not making the wrong choice. Now, invariably, there's a percentage of people that it's going to be the wrong choice. But for most people, we're trying to do the best for as many of you as we can. And so I'll give you an example. One of the ones for us on Fusion, if you remember that development panel that's on the View Issue page, our design mantra was engine light. Now, the other mantra we had was tip of the iceberg, but apparently there were 10 presentations that had that same clip art of the iceberg photo, so we've been forbidden to use the iceberg in any presentation. So I'm going to use this engine light here, and what it meant to us is that we don't want to overburden the user with a bunch of information that might or might not be relevant at the right time. So we just wanted an engine light that would say, hey, a couple of your builds are failing, you might want to check into that, but for some people that's going to be fine. It's like, yeah, those always builds, there's always failing builds until we ship and then they're green. So we really wanted to keep the information small, engine light-like, and as we bumped up against this all the time, and we continually had to pare back. Like, is this an engine light? No, we're starting to add too much stuff. What if they need it? Well, they might need this. No, it's not an engine light. We're not going to do it. And so, referring back to the quote I opened with, working with the teams in this way, sketching things out, putting up in a hallway, standing around the design wall, having themes that you can each and bring up to the fore. Like, I'll be starting to add a bunch of features, and the developer says, no, it's not an engine light. Working this way can be really, really fun, and I think that's part of the whole culture angle of getting software right. I'm a big culture geek, and if you are too, come join me out at the workshop wall. We're trying to do some things over there with more Post-it notes and Sharpies. So that is the end of my talk. There's a couple of takeaways here. Definitely be talking to your customers. Explore what they're talking to you about in fun ways. Do some reframing, and then there's a lot of little tricks. There's a site called tastycupcakes.com I just found out about that has a lot of these tools for exploring data. Do some visualizations and also build mantras. And then these are some of the tools that I listed earlier if you didn't catch the names. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay. So we'll have time for one question. I'm going to throw that up. And that's, what sort of questions do you ask in your client interviews?
What sort of questions do I ask in my client interviews? I invariably start off with, I start off with how big they are actually. And then I work into what their process is and what tools they're using. I'm not as apples and oranges as some interviewers. I don't necessarily follow the same exact script with every single customer, because I feel that allowing the customer to talk about what is irritating them or what they're passionate about is the way I'm going to get to the goal the faster way. So I generally have framing questions and then allow the conversation just to go where it needs to go. But yeah, I'm starting off with who they are, what kind of team, what kind of process they're on, and that usually leads into a richer conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Jay. That's the end of this session.